Hello, friends. This is our first training. It was done actually in February. The reason I ask you to watch this before you watch anything about interaction or anything about the new instrument we're using class is because we must understand the child's brain before we can impact the child's brain. Just like anything else, you got to understand the fundamentals of it. So open your mind. Let's learn a little bit about brain development.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, in that video, the most important thing to take away is repetitive use of a skill, repetitive use of practicing empathy.
On staff here at
Sorry,
AAA. I
guys.
direct a program called Scientific Responsibility.
Okay, sorry about that. So what to take away is the blooming and the pruning. Things that are not repeatedly used get thrown out of the brain. So we need to be practicing empathy and conflict resolution. We need to be reading to these babies, letting them be creative every day. So that way, those areas in their brain will have a strong foundation, and later in life, stronger connections and more complex connections can form, all because of what you did in the early years with these children. You know, it's important to realize that by the time a child is 5, that not we, but 90% of the matter and the material, everything that makes up what is in the brain is already there by age 5. By age 1, 75% of all the matter is there. So the connections are still yet to have formed. But that's what we are for. We are there to form connections. And if you think about it, if we have a child from age 6 weeks until age 5, we are building that child. And yeah, the child does go home in the evenings and on the weekends. What do we typically do after work, though? It's routine. The interactions that this child 6 weeks to 5 years is getting is typically at kitty corner. So yes, we are building children, literally, and we are what determines these kids' future, without a doubt. Even though all that matters there, even when a kid is like 5 years old, they still do not have that impulse control thing yet. That part of the brain that controls those impulses, it still needs more time to develop. The brain will continue to change, and it'll continue to even throw information out well into our 30s. But by age 5, all of those neurons that build up the brain are already there. It's like if you think about a rough draft that you did in high school of a paper. The rough draft has all of the information that you're ever going to put in there. And then you turn that rough draft, the babies, the 0 to 5 are the rough draft paper. And you as teachers are turning that rough draft paper, these babies, into a final paper. It's not very organized. You're going to have to move some sentences around, make it flow better, and change grammatical mistakes and things like that. The paper has all the sustenance there. However, it's not organized the way it should be. And we hope to make these kids into A+ papers. So what can we do to grow the baby's brains? Now that we know that we are growing them, we need to look, follow, chat, take turns, and stretch. Here's a video.
Being a dad, it's not easy. Learning how to balance everything.
You know, I question myself every day if I'm being good to her, if I'm doing the right thing for her, if I'm teaching her the right stuff.
The brain develops most rapidly in the first 5 years of life. During this time, children will form the foundation for lifelong learning.
Vroom showed us that we didn't have to put more on our plate. It's about what we already do, trying to make those moments worth it.
From the moment your baby is born, the interactions you share with them can help strengthen the connections that build their brain. Vroom has worked with scientists and experts to turn this brain-building science into something simple. Something that doesn't change what you do with your child, but how you do it. We call it the 5 brain-building basics. Look, even before babies can talk, they're showing you what they're interested in. Look into their eyes or at what catches their eye and begin brain building. Follow. Powerful brain-building moments are created when you let children lead the way, and you follow by responding to their words, sounds, actions, and ideas. Chat. It may not seem like it, but the sounds and gestures young children make are their way of communicating with you. So talk out loud together, even if they can't talk yet, and keep chatting as your children grow, engaging them and learning about the world around them. Take turns. Back and forth interactions between you and your children are one of the most important ways to help their brains develop. So be sure to take turns while you're talking, playing, or exploring with your children. Stretch. Make the moment last longer by building on what your child says or asking follow-up questions that expand your child's thinking and learning. When you stretch the conversation with questions like, "What do you think about that?" or "How does that make you feel?" You're stretching the brain-building moments too. By partnering with families, brands, and community organizations, Vroom is here to help trigger brain-building interactions between you and your child, using the moments you already.
So we know what we can do. We can take those 5 steps, and that is what builds a baby's brain. But how do the connections develop? Well, it's through synaptic development. And even though that sounds like a big word, it's really not. If you can imagine our brains like an empty field full of little saplings when children are like younger, under age 3. It's like little sapling trees. They're not developed, but all that they will ever have is there. It's just not grown. The branches haven't branched out and become large branches, just like on a synapse. Those dendrites form as the connections are made. Neurons grow the same way as those trees. These connections forming, they come from the experiences that we give the kids. That's how we get the connections. You're building a baby's brain when you look, follow, chat, take turns, and expand, stretch. When you don't do those things, the brain does not build when around you. So we always want to choose to build the baby's brains rather than just be a caretaker. So an infant's brain has so many neurons, and hopefully the connections are starting to form. But there are so many that they have to, through experience, have to prune some of those things out. The things that are not important get thrown out. The things that are not repeated get thrown out. Since we are the caretakers that are with these children for the majority of the day, we're deciding at Kitty Corner what a child's brain prunes out and what ends up blooming and developing and getting connections. So think about that as you're going through the day. For, age 1, oh gosh, this man named Bruce Perry, Perry, you should definitely look that up if you are interested in brain development. Bruce Perry has found that first year of life is, even though ages 2 and 3 are important, that first year is everything. And if these babies are not getting what they need, even though one day they could overcome these things, the lack of nurture that they get under age 1, the lack of stimulation, the lack of care, and the lack of responsive care, really, those things set a child's future to something I don't even want to talk about. And there are outliers, children who are neglected that first year. There are some outliers that make it just fine, but man, it's really hard for them to overcome neglect in that first year of life. Look it up yourself, Bruce Perry. Anyway, back to the subject. Are you reading to infants throughout the day? Not just once a day, but throughout the day. Are we repeatedly having conversations? That means back and forth, not just the teacher talking, saying, all right, this is what we're going to do now. Okay, sit down, be quiet, listen to my story. I'm going to read this book. It's time for y'all to be quiet. That's doing nothing for the kids. That's not teaching them how to have a conversation. Let's teach them how to communicate effectively by having back and forth conversations with them. Are you encouraging empathy throughout the day? Are you modeling conflict resolution? In my opinion, that's more important than reading to a child. They need to see their teacher solving problems out loud every day. They need to see how you act to being angry and saying, oh, Miss Andrea, I feel so angry right now. My feelings are so big. My face feels hot. I think I'm going to go over here and just take 3 deep breaths and gather myself and do it, and then come back. Oh, I'm calmed down now. Thanks for giving me a moment. And man, those kids will start doing that. They're They're mirror neurons, which you'll learn about later. They are just little sponges, and they're going to do what you guys do. So if you guys are saying, you know, stop being mean, sit down, put your head down, you're sitting down now. You made a mean choice, and you go on about your day. You're not helping them solve through problems. You're not telling them to take up for themselves with other children. You're walking around with no smile, no laugh, and you don't enjoy being there. I assure you, you're going to have behavior problems. The way you are in the classroom is the way they're going to be. They will mirror you. So before you come and say, oh man, I've got all these behaviors in my class, I can't control them, reflect on yourself. Record yourself. Are you smiling through the day? Are you laughing? Do these kids feel like you're having a good time? Do you enjoy being with them? Are you using negative language with them all the time? If so, they're going to be negative. Okay. Y'all have heard of windows of opportunities. Well, this is what that is. It's that there's only a certain amount of time that a child can become a strong reader, become creative. You know, if we're not allowing children under age 5 to create, and I don't mean, you know, doing a teacher craft and you let them color a page, you know, and then you're doing the rest of the work. That's not creativity. We got to let these kids be creative every day with Play-Doh and with different kinds of art mediums, because the chances of them becoming creative later in life are so low if we don't get it into their heads early. Most artists have been able to be creative early on in their lives. And if they were not, they're just an outlier. They are one of those people, 5%, you know, could still become creative. It's funny, our jobs as early childhood teachers are literally the most influential teaching job out there. Yet no degrees are required, and no, you know, without degrees, the pay is low, no government funding. So it's really backwards. So now we're going to learn a little bit about epigenetics affecting how we as teachers at Kitty Corner can be affecting one of the children in our program's great-great-grandchildren. We even have the power to turn some genes off, you know, like the alcoholic gene. If there's no exposure, it's all about our environment.
Hi, this is Jack Mack, and I want to talk to you about the fascinating science of genetics. Well, in actual fact, I want to talk to you about the new exciting field of genetic science called epigenetics. Now, epi literally means above. So when I say epigenetics, I mean above genetics. Our bodies are made up of cells, and inside our cells there's a nucleus. Inside the nucleus are things called chromosomes, and our chromosomes are made up out of DNA, which is our genetic blueprint for life. Our DNA blueprints are completely finalized at the moment of conception, and they never change throughout our entire lifetime. These blueprints determine our default future physical characteristics. Things like whether we'll be male or female, how tall we might grow, what our hair or eye color might be, etc. However, the genes don't always do what they're supposed to do. Although the DNA blueprint never changes, the packaging around the DNA, things called methyl groups and histones, sometimes switch off the gene and therefore stop it from acting according to plan. Epigenetics studies these potential changes and how these changes can be passed along to our children along with the DNA itself. It's like sticking post-it notes to a blueprint and saying, that's the plan, but don't do that part of the plan. To understand this best, it helps to think about twins. What's up? Identical twins have the exact same genetic DNA blueprint in every single way. And if we separate two exact identical twins for 3 decades, the first experiences a peaceful, happy life with access to a healthy diet and no major emotional trauma or stress in his work. The other is malnourished as a child, addicted to drugs as a teen, and grows overweight in his 20s. He loses his wife to a car accident and has a very high-stress job. Standing them side by side after 30 years, we would likely see some very visible external differences. But more than that, there would be lasting changes at an epigenetic level. The blueprint would remain unchanged and identical, but the overriding cellular activity would have changed the way some of those genes had expressed themselves permanently. This science is very new, but early indications suggest that these epigenetic changes not only impact the individual, but can potentially be passed on to children, grandchildren, and beyond. Things like stress and diet seem to have a profound lasting effect over how our genetic blueprint operates. And so a stressed pregnant mother with a bad diet could potentially be impacting the epigenetics of her grandchildren. This is a fascinating new field of science and one we're certain to hear more about. But for now, I'll just be trying to manage my own diet and stress, not just for my sake, but for the sake of my grandchildren. Jack Mack, over and out.
Epigenetics. It's fascinating, isn't it? So our DNA does stay the same, but the histones and the methyl around it changes the way that they are expressed permanently by experience. So if the children here at Kitty Corner are receiving a high quality education program that's based around their needs and developmentally appropriate practice, that can literally change the way that their DNA is expressed. Then, since it's permanently changed, it can actually be passed on to generations that are not even in the womb yet, because as you know, a baby receives 23 chromosomes from daddy, 23 from mama. And some of those chromosomes, the mother or the father can change when they pass it on to their children. Think about alcoholism. If you have alcoholism and you choose not to drink your entire life, you will, fingers crossed, change the expression of the alcoholic gene. And 3 generations down the line, the cycle could truly be broken. Big stuff, man. Can you help a fearful child overcome his fears?
This program is brought to you by Emory University.
How can mice like these help us understand how one generation transfers behavioral traits to its descendants?
We, of course, can't use humans because it's just too complicated. We can't study multiple generations in humans, and we can't manipulate the process in humans to understand mechanism and causation. Mice provide the perfect model.
In fact, these mice have helped shed new light on the emerging field of epigenetics, which has profound implications on the way we might one day treat the effects of trauma.
It's been shown for over 100 years that we can take a mouse, expose them to a mild stressor, and pair that stressor with a sensory cue so that they will then avoid that sensory cue, whether it's a smell or a sound or a visual cue. And there is evidence in humans in metabolic cases such as the Dutch hunger winter or the Swedish famine, where there's been profound starvation in a generation, that somehow has changed the metabolic processes in subsequent generations. And that seems to be an epigenetic mechanism. And we were really interested in whether such processes may be going on in our model systems.
Now, Emory researchers Kerry Ressler and Brian Dias have shown that an experience linked with a smell can modify the architecture of the nervous systems in later generations. They have published their findings in Nature Neuroscience.
What we found in the study was that conditioning animals or training them to associate a particular smell with this mild foot shock gives us descendant generations that are slightly more sensitive to this smell, and their brain devotes more real estate to processing the smell.
And this is about 50 microns.
To our minds, we needed to figure out how this was actually occurring. And there are 2 real possibilities. One is biological transmission, which is very similar to cultural transmission and you learning from your parents or your grandparents as to how things are done. And the other possibility was an inheritance of these particular traits.
So they separated mice pups from their biological parents and allowed for them to be raised by unrelated mice that had not been conditioned to avoid a certain smell.
And what we found, shockingly, is that the neuroanatomical changes still persisted. That is, the brain still devoted more real estate to processing that cue that was salient to the ancestral generation.
This study adds to a mounting body of evidence that lifestyle choices and trauma can have profound repercussions beyond one's own life. And one day we might be able to use this knowledge to the advantage of both mice and men.
If we take the adult and train them to no longer be afraid, will it prevent that process from transmitting to the next generation? That might have very important implications for treating at-risk populations.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.
Oh, okay. So, I just want to say, I don't know where the slide got lost at, but it might be next. But with that being said, you saw the mouse video. Think about your irrational fears. So I fear transfer trucks. And there's no real reason for it. My daughter fears, weirdly enough, storage units. Why? Who knows? But, think about deja vu. And this really helps to explain a lot. And I get pretty deep when we start talking about stuff like this. So just block me out if you don't want to go deep with me. But it explains stuff like that because your ancestors, from 2 generations, 3 generations back could have had a traumatic experience with storage units and it changed something. And then it can just become more powerful or it can be wiped out like we were talking about with alcoholism. So we can either make things better for our future generations or worse. Okay. Tantrums and rage. Can we reach a child when they're in a rage? So what happens is you have their sweet little brain and you have an amygdala. That amygdala regulates emotions. Then you have the hypothalamus close to it. It controls temperature. It controls heartbeat. So what happens when a child goes into a rage? And of course, it's going to be usually a irrational rage because that prefrontal cortex is not developed. So melting down over a cookie is completely normal for a child who doesn't have a prefrontal cortex yet, or will they have one, but it's not made the connections. So that amygdala says, okay, hypothalamus, for some reason, this child is melting down. We need to go into fight or flight mode. All right. And then the hypothalamus starts putting that child into fight, flight, or freeze. They shut down. Logical thinking is gone. So even though, that prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet. And so that impulse control is just not there. So when you're trying to reason with a child, you are appealing to a part of the brain that just isn't fully functioning at all. On top of they are in an unconscious state. All right. And so we can't talk them through it. There's no way to talk these kids through when they're being irrational and in a rage or a tantrum. What we can do, we can breathe for them. You're going to see stuff about mirror neurons later. The way I breathe will change the way a child breathes. My body temperature will change a child's body temperature. When Ella gets her monthly fevers, sometimes they get up to 105. That ibuprofen will work for 2 hours. And then we're stuck with 105 fever for 2 hours until we can, or for 1 hour, so we can take Tylenol again. We get naked. I put her against my body and it always lowers it by a degree. So that's what we have to do. We have to be there calm. We have to help them breathe. And then they'll calm down. Then we can talk to them logically about a better choice.
Margaret, have some chicken. Have some chicken. that make you feel about Margaret?
Wish I could just stop laughing. Tantrums. That's my problem.
This is what happens. Here's my son, my beautiful, happy son. Happy, 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 happy. And then the wind changes, and then all of a sudden, not happy, not happy, not happy, not happy. And then out of nowhere, there's my little sweetie, melted down. What's happening in the brain?
Children who are younger than like kindergarten age, the part of the brain that controls self-regulation is still under construction. So in other words, children can feel a sense of anger or injustice over something like not getting a cookie or their favorite toy.
Doesn't happen in all kids, but for the many kids who do throw tantrums, their feelings of anger and sadness take control of their behavior.
And this like overblown reaction usually comes in two emotional responses. The first one is the anger, hence the word temper and temper tantrum.
Okay.
And then comes sadness. And usually the anger dissipates before the sadness.
Nico gets sad. He does. He has like full-on fits, and then he needs mama's. What's a little hug?
But
It's my favorite part.
All these emotions we're talking about, though, the anger and the anxiety and the fear and the stress, those are survival instincts in us. Like, we have to have those in order to stay alive. These young brains don't know how to regulate these instincts and don't know how to take in the information from the outside world and form a rational response to it. Like, it's a cookie, it's okay, I don't need to scream. That part of the brain's not there yet.
All right, like, mother, I really do want that cookie.
Some researchers think tantrum reactions evolved to capture the attention of parents or caretakers, with the anger functioning to get the parents to do what the kid wants, and the sadness functioning to gain a parent's sympathy or comfort.
So what's happening in the brain is nothing like what's happening on the sidewalk.
To illustrate, we have a lovely model brain here.
Oh, that is a mushroom.
We're gonna split the brain in half.
Oh, brain
to make
surgery
two
today.
hemispheres, because we're being super realistic.
I will use my imagination.
Also, this looks delicious. I really like portobello mushroom. Okay, now we have a cross section of our mushroom brain. Obviously here, this is the brainstem. This is gonna send signals from the brain to the rest of the body. If only we had some paint.
Paint?
To delineate it.
Here you go.
Awesome. Blue for brainstem?
Sure.
And right here is the amygdala. Maybe pink?
Pink.
Now this is an almond-shaped little thing in the brain.
Tiny?
Little tiny, that's good.
Okay, here's what we think is going on.
The amygdala is gonna get emotional input of some type of threat or some type of injustice.
This is injustice.
It then sends a distress signal for things like fear, anxiety, or stress to the hypothalamus, which is mushroom brain. Maybe it's like right here. There you go. The hypothalamus will
It's
then
like, ah, freak out.
The hypothalamus is like, we need to act. And we'll start raising heart rate, blood pressure,
and all these other processes that include a rise in adrenaline and related hormones, like the Hulk in the Avengers movies.
And it sends signals down through the brainstem to the body. And you have a full-blown meltdown in the form of a tantrum. But when kids turn about 4, the prefrontal cortex helps moderate behavior. Think of it as like a traffic cop in the brain that'll help kids with decision making. The prefrontal cortex is like right up here and can help kids regulate their emotions. In other words, some type of threat signal comes in, and the prefrontal cortex will take a step back and say, hold on, let's think about this before we have an exaggerated response. So kindergartners should be better at controlling their emotions and handling the ups and downs of their dynamic life.
So there is an end in sight. At some point, Nico's PFC will turn into like a super chill person and be like, whoa, 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 man, you don't need that cookie right now.
The struggle's real when you're 2 or 3. If you want to throw a temper tantrum, go for it. If you lost your blocks, you know what? Let the world know.
We're talking to 2 and 3-year-olds.
I am. I'm literally talking directly to them.
do it.
If you want to watch Parental Logic, and your parent is like, no.
I like them, especially him. So the brain can change due to experiences. This is called neuroplasticity. In their experiments, what they did is they took some rats and that lived in cages with no stimulation, no activities, no spin wheel, only food and water for survival. Then they compared them to rats that lived in cages that were full of activities and toys and things to keep them stimulated. When they compared those two rats, guess which one had larger brains and guess which one had the bigger neurons and the number of connections that they had. Of course, it's the one with all the experience, right? We know this, but when people argue with us, it's always good to have this research. So what we do when, now that we're understanding it a little better, the first thing that we always want to do in a classroom is make sure that there's something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can look it up, but at the bottom is, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I cold or hot? If those things are not met, a child will not be able to learn. Next up would be safety. Am I going to be worried all day that some other kid in this classroom is going to come up and hurt me, punch me, pinch me, bite me all day long? If they're worried about other classmates, you can go ahead and throw teaching right out the door and just focus on positive climate and trying to get that child's behavior under control. A child that's worried about whether he's going to be safe or not will never learn. Then comes, am I loved? Do my teachers want me? There we go. We're talking about when you're in the classroom. Are you walking around like this all the time? Are you going, oh God? Are you saying, just go sit down over there. I'm done dealing with you. If you're doing that, a child's not going to learn from you because they don't respect you. And basically, like, it's so easy. All right. It's mutual respect. If you respect the children will respect you. If you do not respect the children will not respect you. If you listen to the children, do you hear them? Do you allow them to talk? Or is it always teacher talk? Do you allow them? Do you look at them as a person? Or do you just look at them as this annoying little 3-year-old running around? If you're looking at them most of the time as a problem and an annoying 3-year-old, they are not going to give you good results. And if you're looking at them as an annoyance every day and you're not enjoying your job and you're not happy, they will not be happy. So then after that, guess what? They're ready to learn. We do that first. Then we do responsive care and then executive functioning skills. This is straight out of class. If funny, class came 2 months later, but it is all based around the same stuff, isn't it? This is emotional support. This is classroom organization. And this is executive functioning instructional support.
Not only in their behavior, but also in their brain activity and even in their brain structures. Based on decades of research in developmental neuroscience, it's increasingly clear that when we do anything, when we engage executive function skills in particular and use them, we're activating networks in our brain. The use of those networks changes the networks every time. Cognitive flexibility is a skill that depends on networks in the brain, and it's a skill that gets easier with use as the corresponding brain regions become more efficient. They become more efficient in a number of different ways. For example, extraneous connections get pruned away so that you're only left with the circuits that really matter. It really does come down to practice. And one always has to increase the level of challenge in order for that practice to continue to be useful. These are skills just like any other skill, like riding a bicycle or skiing. They may be more or less challenging, and some children may have an easier or a harder time acquiring these skills, but ultimately they can be improved by practice and by self-awareness about what it is that one's learning.
So let's now promote these executive functional skills. And it's interesting. I've already been teaching on class so much that we are promoting them through the class instrument. But this is a great video talking to you, just backing up what I'm teaching about how children really do learn through play, and they don't learn by being forced.
Pop quiz. What's the theory of relativity? Well, if you said E equals mc squared, that's great. But don't be too proud of yourself, because that doesn't mean you know the theory of relativity. Can you apply it to the world around you? Probably not. It's the same thing when you ask your toddler to recite 2 + 2 = 4. Just because a toddler can say something doesn't mean she actually gets it. The best way to give your kids the foundation for truly understanding advanced concepts like math or physics? Play. Play is the first and most impressionable way children learn. It's so powerful a teacher, in fact, that for decades, early childhood education experts have been pushing for formal schooling to be delayed until age 7 or 8. Finland has actually done this, and there, teenagers consistently top the world on international standardized tests. So what is this incredibly important fairy dust foundational knowledge that kids build through play? Play builds the 2 skill sets that research has proven to be the 2 biggest predictors of academic success: language skills and executive function. Children build language skills through pretend play, which starts to emerge around 12 months. At this stage, children might pretend to sleep, eat, or sip imaginary water out of an imaginary glass. As a child grows older, pretend play becomes much more imaginative and complex and involves other children. But from the very start, language skills grow as the child narrates his actions, first only to himself, and then as his ability to imagine new scenarios grows, he will narrate to others or engage in pretend conversations and dialogues. The research is clear. The more a child talks and hears in the first 5 years of life, the stronger his verbal skills later in life. Executive function is the other skill that best predicts academic success, and it is also best developed through pretend play. Executive function, we could call it mind control, is the ability to consciously control your thoughts, actions, and emotions. It allows us to plan, remember instructions and rules, multitask, mentally adapt, and stay on task, all qualities of a successful mini-adult in training. When children pretend play, they must plan a narrative, follow the rules of the scenario, and when others are involved, pay attention and respond to how it evolves. It's complicated. Active physical play amplifies these other skills. Sports and games that get kids up and moving have clear-cut rules that teach kids to master their impulses and focus. And physical exertion has been shown to help kids absorb and retain what they learn. Something called object play, which starts at around 5 months, is the urge to explore new objects. Encouraging free object play is enormously important to babies' development. Babies, especially, need to explore the world on their own, feel objects with their hands, toes, and even mouths. They need to be able to drop things while playing and see and hear what happens when they do, and then pick them back up. All of this combines to teach them the concept of cause and effect, which lays the foundation for understanding more sophisticated concepts. Your baby let go of a toy and it fell down, not up? 17 times in a row. Congrats. You can cross gravity off your teaching plan. Experiencing cause and effect in play stimulates problem solving, and kids are more likely to experience this when you butt out. This doesn't mean that you leave your kid in the wild alone, but it does mean not instructing your toddler to build a tower of blocks the right way, drawing a bunny properly, fixing her Play-Doh masterpiece, or even physically guiding her to try a toy for the first time. Studies show that children who are left to figure out how an object or toy works on their own become more persistent and creative problem solvers than kids who are shown. And pretend play also builds the skill of decontextualization. That's a fancy word for understanding that one thing can be used to represent an entirely different thing. Like when your kid puts a bowl on his head and calls it a crown, or uses a banana to represent a boat. This kind of play lays the groundwork not only for an appreciation of poetic metaphor, but also a little something called algebra, when letters suddenly start representing numbers. Play isn't just fun and games, it has a huge role in your child's development. Remember, there is no right or wrong way to play. If your baby isn't building an architecturally sound fortress out of blocks, if your kid's Play-Doh giraffe looks like something at the bottom of your trash bin, let it go. She's learning something critical in the process, something that just might help her understand the theory of relativity one day.
Yep. So we have exploratory and pretend play, and we definitely know, without a doubt, that is the best way to teach a child under age 5. To have this cool little experiment where they have a toddler playing with blocks and mixing bowls. Then they have a toddler playing, or a toddler recognizing letters with their mom or staff member. Guess whose brain lit up more? Of course, the tot with the blocks and the mixing bowls. They're learning, the connections are going. If you're having a 2.5, 3-year-old recognize letters with flashcards, that brain is just not lighting up. So we got to get it to them in a different way. Cell phones, computers, things like that. That's what helps them learn about the world around them. They also have a proof that the less the teacher teaches, the more the child learns. The more brainstorming questions the teacher asks, the more the child learns. So again, just that class instrument we're using is doing what we need. That previous screen, it had handouts to it in my training, but basically what it's saying is we are not having free play to have a free-for-all. We are having free play. The children go in, they find an interest, you go behind them and do problem-solving questions, teach letters and numbers through play so it sticks and it's meaningful. All that'll be covered in the next training about interaction. So, gosh, there was one more thing. When you're sitting down with the child playing with them, you got to make sure you're facing the other children. You don't want to have your back turned playing in a corner and the world's going crazy behind you. One teacher can be at the tables, positioned where she can see most of the kids, and another teacher can be rotating, going from center to center, interacting and teaching through play. The teacher at the tables can lead art, or if you want to do an activity, let's do those individual lesson planning like we were talking about in our other trainings, to where we divide into groups. We have an advanced group, we have a basic group, and we have a group that needs a little bit more support when they are doing your learning activities. So you want to do a D-ditto, do a D-ditto, but do it during free play. Send everybody to their centers, let them pick their centers, call a group of your 5 most advanced down. Another teacher is walking around, pumping the lesson plan you have for the week into the kids' brains through play. Oh yeah, it's going to get in there. They're going to learn. And then the other teacher is working with these 5 on their D-ditto, or whatever it is you want to do that day. Play-Doh, turning screws to help those wrists develop for early writing. Then those 5 go back to play, and the 5 more normal children are brought up. And so with that first group, you might be practicing big D and little d and the word dog. With the second group, you might be just tracing D. With that third group that you bring to the table, it's very possible that you are just working on making D's with Play-Doh, because those kids need to build muscles for their pincer grasp. Because if we start using muscles to write letters and the children's hands have not developed yet, and most of them have not, then it can mess up their pincer grasp, and they'll have messy writing no matter what you do. And they're just going to be messy writers because their muscles didn't develop right. So just think about that. Okay, responsive care. This is the third thing that we need to be doing. We've checked our hierarchy of needs. We're doing executive functioning skills in the classroom, and now we're going to give responsive care. The way in which adults deal with their emotions is a model for the children, as we've already talked about. You know, a teacher yelling stop loudly and then just going on would be the version of a child who has no self-control going up and hitting his friend because he didn't like what they do and walking away. So for the teachers that are yelling stop, do your children hit and walk away? Something to think about. When we're telling a child to go sit down and think about their decision, is this a child who has prefrontal cortex advancement? Are they able to sit down and go, she's told me to stop and think about what I did. Okay, I took that kid's toy. And are they thinking this in their head? It's going to be a better choice for me to say, hey, may I please have that toy when you're done? Okay, I'm going to make a better choice next time. If that child's capable of that, absolutely. Going to sit down and thinking about their decisions, the best thing you can do for them. But if they're not, you got to help them work through that rather than just sitting them down, okay? They're not going to reflect. They're not capable of reasoning at that age, most of them. You guys always see me in the classrooms too saying, don't tell me, tell your friend, because they're like, Miss Jennifer, so-and-so touched my hair. Okay, we'll go tell them. I don't like it when you touch my hair. Please stop. Try to get them to solve it first. We want these, especially these little girls, to be able to stand up for themselves. This is the mirror neurons that I continuously talk about.
Hold me tight. Don't let me go.
Why do people cry at movies? Why do sports fans get so excited during a game? Why do they feel anxious if their team is losing? The answer? Mirror neurons, a set of brain cells on either side of the head that might explain why people feel empathy.
What we've found is the mechanism that underlies something which is absolutely fundamental to the way that we see other people in the world.
The mirror neuron was first discovered at the University of Parma in Italy. Researchers there identified a neuron that fires both when a monkey picks up a peanut and when the monkey watches someone pick up a peanut.
The same neurons, one neuron, fire both when the monkey observes something and when the monkey is doing something. It's almost unbelievable.
It was surprising because this cell which was involved with motor planning for the monkey turned out to be interested in the movements of other people as well.
The brain uses the mirror neurons to mirror the movements it sees. And this happens in people too.
If you can use the years of training that you yourself have done, learning to crawl, then learning to walk, then learning to eat, this is an incredibly rich set of knowledge that you could apply to the problem of actually seeing what's going on. The mirror system is the way that you tap into, the way that you harness your own abilities and project them out into the world.
So sports fans can picture themselves playing when they watch a game. But what makes them feel the pain when their favorite player drops the ball?
So the idea was to try to figure out how the emotional system and this motor system are connected together.
To find out, Marco Iacoboni looked at the brain scans of individuals when he presented them with a series of faces. In the first round, he asked people to imitate the faces. In the second round, he asked people to simply look at the faces. As expected, he found that the mirror neurons were activated during both rounds. But in addition, he found that the happy area of the brain lit up whenever people either imitated or looked at happy faces. So he thinks the mirror neurons can send messages to the emotional system in our brain. And that's the mechanism that allows us to feel empathy with other people.
We strongly believe that that's a unifying mechanism that allows people to actually connect at a very simple level.
So what happens if the mechanism is broken?
It's been known for some time that children with autism could be quite intelligent, but have a profound deficit in social interaction.
Christian likes to play, but like many kids with autism, he prefers to play alone. He has a hard time communicating and does not always understand questions.
So Christian, can you tell me what you did in school today?
Doing well.
Dr. Ramachandran and his graduate student hope to gain understanding of autism by studying the brainwaves of children like Christian.
So we're going to be reading your brainwaves with this cap.
When mirror neurons are working correctly, they fire both for doing an action and seeing the same action. So for most people, the brainwaves for doing and seeing look the same. But for Christian, the waves look different.
Their brains may indeed be different in that regard, and they may have deficits in the mirror neuron system. But we don't know this for sure yet. Additional work needs to be done using brain imaging.
What we do know is that healthy humans are very social.
Everybody's interested in this question. What makes humans unique? You can say humor, you're the laughing biped. Language, certainly, okay? But another thing is culture. And a lot of culture comes from imitation, watching your teachers do something.
So it sounds like the mirror neuron is a big part of what makes us human.
There would be very little point in having a mirror system if you lived on your own. There'd be a lot of point in having a digestive system if you lived on your own. There'd be a good point in having a movement system if you lived on your own. There'd be a good point in having a visual system if you lived on your own. But there'd be no point in having a mirror system. The mirror system is the most basic social brain system. It's a brain system which there's no point in having if you don't want to interact or relate to other people.
Sorry to leave you hanging. Okay, so we scratched the iceberg with conscious discipline when I first came here. Conscious discipline is a phenomenal program, okay? I've bought a premium membership for conscious discipline. It wasn't cheap. I'm begging you guys to use it. Go on there. They have lots of printouts. They have lots of classroom tools, books you can use and print out. I gave you those cards, those little belt things you wear, the cards. I had conscious discipline statements to help a child through the day, but it involves a lot. And one day we'll get to it. Right now we're sticking with class because it's easier to implement. So my username on consciousdiscipline.com, all one word, conscious discipline, lowercase. If you'll log on, please, with the username Kennedy, I should have typed this in there, but sorry. Kennedy, all lowercase, letter N, B, R, I, T, A, I, N. If you guys can just snapshot, please, from your phone, when you go into Conscious Discipline, enter the username kennedyanbritain@gmail.com, all lower. My password is big K, little m, big B, 0, 3, 2, 5, 0, 4. If y'all can snapshot that, please. I'm begging you to use this site. Again, it wasn't cheap, and I don't want to feel like I've done it for no reason. Use me. Use it. Hope y'all got a snapshot of it. Let's keep that. Okay, so that wraps it up, and now you guys can go on and watch your interactions and also the class. Thanks, guys. I'm still here, eh? And meeting for all.